Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. We're actually recording here live before the show starts on Saturday. We're at the Western Hunting Expo here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've got Nigel Bird of Backcountry, New Zealand here with me and his wife, Myriam. And, seeing you at the show last year was so exciting to see you guys here. My wife and I, the background I have with you guys is we came for our honeymoon, and it was 2005, I believe, is when we came. Yep. March of 2004, March of 2005.
Correct.
And we did 9 days in New Zealand. We did 14 days, but we fished for 9 days. And 3 of those days, we got to fish with a fishing guide named Nigel Burt.
That's correct. Remember it fondly.
This character right here is so into fishing that we were driving down the road, and he was trying to describe to me a fishing situation of a presentation of a fly, and he whips out a Sharpie of some sort, dry erase marker, and starts writing on the window of the vehicle as we're going, and I'm like, this guy is into it. So we had such a great time fishing, and I've wanted to get you on the podcast. We've had you on. Have I had you on before?
No, I don't think we have. We've talked about it.
Yeah, talked about it several times.
We're busy people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here we are at the show, just surrounded in your booth here with incredible red stag, and it's been awesome to see you kind of transition from hardcore fishing guide to branching out and doing hunting, fishing, doing all the things that you do. You have a place where the hunters come and stay, and it's just awesome. So welcome.
Oh, thank you, Jay. It was definitely a special fishing trip that we had.
Yeah.
I remember a beautiful big brown trout for your wife on your honeymoon, and you don't forget those special times that we had. The weather was good, the fishing was great, all of those sorts of things. And that was back in 2005, so we were actually getting into the hunting a lot at that stage. We were definitely a larger business. We had partners and guides working for us and those sorts of things back in 2005. But of course in 2008 things slowed down a little bit with the global financial crisis. So Myriam and I at that point, we sat back and we looked really long and hard at our business and what we wanted to do and be a part of within that business. And probably the toughest thing in those tough couple of years that we had, New Zealand had the earthquake straight after the global financial crisis. So there was a big slowdown in tourism for a few years, but that's not a bad thing because we sat back, looked at our business really strategically, and we went, hey, what do we love doing? And the reality is Myriam and I love doing what we're doing now, which is we're a number one stop shop for everyone. We do one hunt or one fishing trip at a time. We host clients in our own accommodation. We've got our own hunting property, which we'll talk about in depth shortly. But we've gone back to being just ourselves, working in the business and on the business. And so prior to 2008, we were kind of getting a little bit despondent because you've got this big outfitting business with guides running around, and instead of guiding a lot, you're actually a human resource manager. And so it's about finding out what your passion is, and our passion is delivering incredibly good trips of a lifetime to guests that are coming to New Zealand, predominantly from North America, and that's what we're really passionate about, and we get a lot of enjoyment out of that as well. So it was a tough couple of years, as you get in global financial crisis, and you realise that everyone in America was suffering as well. And then we were followed up with those earthquakes in Christchurch, which slowed things down with airlines and flights and stuff like that a little bit. But overall, we've recovered really well. We enjoy what we're doing now. We're here at the Expo every year, and this is probably our 7th year in a row here now. This works really, really well for us. We just love meeting people. We've got lots of contacts like yourself that we bump into. It was so nice to catch up with you again, Jay, after all these years. Yeah,
and every time I've come by the booth over the last couple of years, you just have people all around you, and it's just so great to see a business, see you guys flourishing, and it's obvious you and your wife love what you're doing. You have that personal connection with people, and you see people coming up and giving you big hugs, and that I'm sure that's what drives you to do what you do.
Yep.
to back up just a little bit, we're talking about primarily the South Island of New Zealand.
Correct.
Let's tell our listeners a little bit about New Zealand, where it's located for some of the people that might not know, and then talk about specifically within the South Island, like where your hub is.
Yeah, great. That's a good idea. And so New Zealand, it's way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. You know, it's from Christchurch, our main city in the South Island, and that's the port of entry where we pick you guys up. We're only a 5-hour flight down to Antarctica, and so the good old Antarctica base is in Christchurch. So there's a lot of Americans coming out for that base as well. So, but from LA or from San Francisco, that's a 12-hour flight, overnight flight. So the easiest way to get to New Zealand is often with Air New Zealand. So some people use their air miles. They'll fly with Delta or American. A lot of those flights often get routed through Australia. So you're actually adding on about 6 hours and a bit of logistics to that whole trip. So if you want the simplest, most effective form of getting to New Zealand and with the least amount of jet lag and the least amount of hassle, then Air New Zealand is great. So they fly direct out of LA, San Fran and Houston. Now American Airlines are experimenting with some flights direct into Christchurch, which will be phenomenal. The time period will work for the fly fishing season at the moment, so that'll crank up next summer, our summer, which is your winter, and then they're going to play around with some dates around that, and it may not flow too far into the hunting season, but we'll just keep listeners and people informed with that. New Zealand is a stunning couple of large islands. People were quite amazed at how large they are, which you would have been, Jay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yes, and the South Island has probably, there's 2/3 of the population in North Island, 1/3 in the South Island. There's just over 1 million people in the South Island, and it's a pretty big island.
And of that million, a bunch of them are in a couple of the big cities,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, so there's 400,000 in Christchurch. Dunedin's a pretty large city as well. So the great thing about the South Island is the landscapes are changing every hour of driving, or every 2 hours of driving. It's just so diverse in landscapes. It's so pretty. And then you come on in, and you're just blown away by the lack of people, And likewise, every time I'm in Salt Lake driving on the freeway, I'm just blown away by the number of people.
Right.
Yeah. So we're very fortunate in that respect, and luckily we're still an advanced enough country to have all the right facilities. So the accommodations, the meals, the transport. It's, we don't have freeways, but we've got pretty good roads, given that we've only got 4.5 million people over a vast landmass. Yeah,
that was one of the things that struck me, was the roads are actually in really good shape. At least they were when I was there.
Yep.
The other thing is the countryside and the pride of ownership with the New Zealand people. I always tell people, you're driving around, you're in the country, and it's just beautiful, but you come to a few little houses here and there, farms and what have you, and there's not just stuff piled up like here in America. A lot of places you'll get in rural America, and you'll just have jacked up trucks and trailers off the off the wheels, and this whole thing. And it just seemed like New Zealand, people's yards were trimmed, beautiful flowers. Like there was a whole sense of pride of ownership that we noticed.
Yep.
Coming from here, going there, where it seemed like people really had pride in everything that they do.
Exactly, and it just flows. It's our culture, We're friendly, happy people. We've had our challenges because we sit on an alpine fault. We get earthquakes occasionally, and we don't have a massive economy, so you just have to spread the money around a little bit. But everyone's got a lot of pride in New Zealand, how green it is, how we respect the land, and we're caretakers of that. So chucking trash out the window, that's just something that's not
doesn't
seen.
happen.
And frowned upon a lot.
Let's talk a little bit about the seasons before we kind of get into your operation. What the listeners need to know is it's kind of a reverse.
Exactly, it's 6 months, so plus or minus 6 months. So right now it's winter here, and you guys are heading into spring hopefully soon. I'm sure you're all ready for that. And but for us, we just came out of when we jumped on the plane to come over here, it was a really nice warm 94 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty warm for us. But we go back, so we leave the show next week. We'll head straight back into a few more weeks of fishing guiding, and then we're straight into our fall hunting season. So when it's spring in America, it's fall, and the rut is on in New Zealand. So,
and your business primarily, you do tons of fishing, but your biggest amount of business is in the hunting.
Definitely.
It's kind of made a switch, and now you're way more focused on the hunting than you are the fishing.
Yep.
But you still have that aspect of hardcore backcountry fishing and getting the full
well.
experience.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, a big driver of that is fly fishing in New Zealand is all public access. There's very little private access, and the fishing is absolutely fantastic. But we do get storm cycles coming through, and we do see an increase in angling pressure. So whilst the fishing is still really, really good and really exciting, the big driver for our business is, we're really passionate about the hunting. We now own, as of last year, we now own 100% of our 3,000-acre hunting block, which is our predominant red stag block. We don't have tar on there. We have the odd chamois, and we've got fallow deer and rams on there. So the tar, they have, there's a government policy or a tar management plan where the tar aren't allowed north of a big river system called the Rangitata. And so the tar, an hour south of our base, and our red stag property is an hour north of our base. But yeah, definitely because of owning that property, and it's a part of our business we can control a lot better than just having to deal with the weather or other outside influences. The fishing when it's on is fantastic. This year we've had a big mouse year, so a lot of your listeners won't understand, but what our forests do is every 5 or 7 years, the forest will dump a huge amount of seed on the ground over there, and you get this massive plague of mice and rats that eat all the seed. And they run out of food and they swim across rivers, and the trout eat them big time. I've seen photos of trout that have been killed, and they've opened up the stomach contents. There's 13 mice and 2 rats.
Jeez.
Which is a huge amount of protein.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's, we've got big genetic for our brown trout and rainbows, and we get large fish anyway. But on years like this, which come around, it's sort of every 5 years, that's when we're starting to regularly see 10, 12, 14 pound brown trout freely feeding in the rivers.
So at that point in time, you can actually strip mice on the surface, or are you fishing them subsurface, and the fish just really keyed in on them?
Yeah, you can strip mice on the surface, and at night it's phenomenal. So you can get out there and do that at night. During the day, sometimes it can be tough as well. I'm not gonna cover anything up, because they often get their fill of mice at night time under a full moon. Right. So in the daytime, they can be sitting pretty doggo in a big pool, and you'll go, that's a 14-pound trout, but he's not moving a lot, and he's not.
He's full.
He's full.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you chuck a size 16 mayfly up there and float that past him, he's not interested whatsoever. So you just have to be a little bit strategic in those mouse years and try some different techniques.
So sometimes the mouse years, they can gorge themselves so much that it actually makes it where the fish are kind of tough to catch.
They can be very tough to catch, and people latch on to the mouse shears as well. So there's an increase in angling pressure because everyone knows it's a mouse shear.
Because they want to see the big explosion on the surface with a 10+ pound.
Yeah, and they want to see those big trout. Right. So you have to have. New Zealand isn't a land of catching a lot of trout, as you guys would have experienced, but the quality of the trout is phenomenal, and the experience. So you have to go in there with an open mind and just say, I've just got to keep trying, I've got to be patient, I've got to keep trying. And over the clients we have that come back year on year on year on year, they know they're going to have good years, mediocre years, and some pretty average years, and that's all driven by weather and trout patterns and
stuff. And with that, also with those years, within that year of fishing, when those clients come back for a week or 2 weeks or whatever they're coming back for, 3 days, there's always going to be a good couple hours, a good day, a bad day. I mean, it's just part of it. But the reward fishing, is a giant fish. And that's what most people come to New Zealand for. Americans come because we don't have the 10 to 15 pound brown trout here. We do, but not like you can go there and actually catch a few.
Sight fish them in a river. You know? And if you're lucky, you'll turn up on the river on the right day, you'll bump into a big brown trout. And the 10 pound plus fish are hard to come by, but they're there's no doubt. And you'll see photos of them this year. And if you're lucky, you'll see that fish all the conditions will be right. There'll be a mayfly hatch going on. That fish will be up near the surface feeding on them. And that's when, 10 years of fly fishing all comes down to this moment.
One
and
cast.
It's phenomenal. It's so exciting. And if you get rewarded with netting and taking a photo of that fish, it's just it's a lifelong dream.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know for me it was just unbelievable to go, and I keep telling people, well, I want to go, but I want to go back for like at least a month.
Yep.
I want to go where I can, maybe have 1, 2, 3 good days and, experience and not feel like I'm rushed, just go experience. I just had such a great time. Your hunting operation, would you say, is primarily centered around the red stag?
The red stag's the big driver for people wanting to come to New Zealand. Brand New Zealand is brand red stag as well. You can get red stag elsewhere in the world, but New Zealand is very well known for the red stags. And we had those genetics gifted to New Zealand back in 1904 and 1906. So the red stags came out of Europe. We were lucky enough genetically to get a couple of bloodlines. So this is a really interesting point. So our English bloodline of red stag came off the royal family and some of those estates within England. Their genetical traits were lots of points, but not very long antlers and not a lot of mass. But we also managed to get a Eastern European red stag bloodline, and the genetics there was a lot of mass and a lot of tine length. And because those two lots of genetical traits have been delivered to New Zealand way back then, and then we've got the perfect feeding conditions and environment for them. We don't have very harsh winters, for example. We were lucky enough to get some of the best genetics in the world really early on in the piece, and now we've just got these incredible stags that are throwing all sorts of stuff. And you sit here and you look at all these stags, they're individually so different.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference between our Rocky Mountain elk and, say, a stag, in that you look at a lot of this non-typical, you look at a lot of just the extra, just unbelievable point structure.
Yep.
When is the roar?
Roar.
And, I know people ask me when the elk rut, and it's kind of a little hard to pin down exactly, but just historically, what is kind of the major time frame, and then even more specifically, is within that, is there kind of a 2, 3, 4 week period where it's like, this is the really good time?
Exactly. The 4 week period, the peak of the rut, we call it the roar. And that's because they roar like a lion. The peak of that period is definitely the last 2 weeks of March and the first 2 weeks of April. So building rut is we'll go home, we'll start hearing some stags starting to moan and groan and rut around us early March. And then you'll peak mid-March, and that'll slow down pretty noticeably by the middle of April. We do get a second cycle where the hinds cycle again, the ones that haven't got pregnant in the first part of the rut, and the stags do fire up again. So you'll hear, right through till the end of May, you'll hear stags moaning and roaring occasionally, but that peak period is end of March, early April. If you want to combine your hunt with fly fishing, March is the month.
Okay.
Because you can, the bulk of our rivers are open till the end of March. We've got some rivers open at the end of until the end of April, but then everything closes for spawning. So late February through March, we've got red stags and hard antler. They're stripping at the moment. They're just finishing stripping. And then we've got good fly fishing towards the end of the season as well. So.
And we talked about South Island. You kind of talked about you can fly into Christchurch. There's different options. As far as your location within the South Island, it's kind of out in the middle, isn't it?
We're very much the middle. So we're 1 hour inland from Christchurch Airport. So most flights will come in at the moment. They come into Auckland Airport, where you'll clear customs. You'll fly down 1 hour down to Christchurch, and Myriam and I will pick you up there.
Okay.
And we go and see the taxidermist because he's only 10 minutes away.
Okay.
And we head straight up to our hunting ground, which is 45 minutes drive.
Okay.
And that first day we'll do a lot of just getting a feeling for the landscape. We jump in the side-by-side, drive around, get the binocs and spotting scope out, start seeing some animals and those sorts of things. And then from there, before you get too tired, because obviously the first day or so you're dealing with a little bit of jet lag, we get you back home and settled down. So between our hunting grounds, we're about an hour's drive back to our base farm. We've got a little 24-acre farm that we've got our cottages on. There's some photos there on the back wall, which your listeners can't see. But we built these cottages purposely built for hunters and fly fishing people as well. So
and they're beautiful.
They're stunning. They're well laid out. They're beautiful. We love staying in them as well. We've got outdoor baths at both of those cottages, and a big part of that is because we don't have any light pollution or pollution. So our stars in the southern hemisphere are just amazing. The Milky Way, the Southern Cross. So a lot of people after their hunt will come in and fill up the tubs outside and put the bubble bath in and just, rest the body and watch satellites and shooting stars and the Milky Way, which is a really enjoyable part of the experience.
Talk about on the island itself predation. I mean, you guys don't have the coyotes, the mountain lions, the bobcats, what we experience here. So talk a little bit about that, some of the good things about that, and maybe some of the struggles with that.
Yeah, so the incredible part of New Zealand is that pre-people turning up on the place, the only mammal was a tiny little bat. So we had a lot of birds and a lot of insects, but there weren't any mammals. And then the Polynesians came in, and they would have brought a few things like some of their food sources and dogs and cats and probably a couple of mice and rats and those sorts of things.
Probably that were on the ships and they just
exactly
came over.
And then as the Europeans came in, they started bringing everything else, and that's where some of our wild sheep have come from, because when the first explorers travelled around the Pacific, every time they stopped somewhere they would drop off a breeding pair of sheep, so that next time they came back that was a food source for them. And
interesting.
So a lot of the wild sheep, like the Arapawa ram, which is a big brown, we call them Bob Marleys because they've got dreadlocks and double curls. So they all originated from those early settlers chucking them out of boats for a food source.
And are they fairly plentiful?
Yes, they are. Yep, they're all over the place and fun to hunt. So and they're a nice little add-on. They're like $900 for a double curl ram. So that's pretty fun. But we don't have predators, so we don't have anything that eat the deer or the sheep or anything. So there aren't any bobcats, there aren't any wolves, there aren't any crazy things. We don't have snakes and major spiders, so you actually feel really safe when you're hunting and fly fishing, which is really nice. So obviously so the positives of that is, as New Zealanders, we can hunt every day of the year. We can take as many animals as we like, and if we don't do that, then the deer populations overpopulate. And so that happened in the 60s and the 70s, where the forest starts getting really damaged. We start getting landslips. The deer just took over. And so the government then employed professional cullers, and then the helicopter industry started up, where they were paid pretty good money to fly around and kill as many animals as they could. That then evolved into, hey, there's a market for all this meat, and there's a market for velvet as well. And that's when we saw farming start. So the helicopter cullers created these net guns that are often used for wild animal recovery, because we brought that technology to America. And so they went out and live captured all of these deers and started a farming industry, which was selling the meat to Europe and America and selling the velvet to China and Korea. And so those are big farming industries in New Zealand that all evolved from the fact that we didn't have predation of our game species. So the pros are that we can hunt every day of the year, take what we want. The negatives to that are you need to be able to manage your genetics to get these big heads. So the fact that we can hunt every day of the season means that anyone that goes out that's a new hunter, for example, will come across what would be a genetically really nice red stag probably 7 years down the track. They'll harvest it at 2 years, and they're taking those good genetics out of that gene pool, and they're often leaving the poor genetics in there. So in public lands, whilst you can still get very nice big red stags on occasion, you often see a lot lower quality red stags for that very reason, that we're hunting them all the time and we're taking out the good genetics. On private properties, which are the bulk of the outfitters that operate in New Zealand, they'll have, like us, we own our own 3,000 acre private property. Others will have a lease or a right to access. We're doing the reverse. We're actively, every season, we're culling out the poor genetics and we're letting the good genetics breed up, and we're managing them. So we'll harvest trophies at 7, 8 or 9 years old. We won't be harvesting them at 3 years old. We'll let the 3-year-olds come through.
Talk a little bit about, from a government standpoint as well, I've heard that, there have been times where they just, anything out on public ground, they just want them all dead. They want to kill them all, which then led a lot of the private property owners to fencing their properties and placing a value on those animals because they do have value.
Yep.
And there's a little bit of a misconception that, why that happened.
Yep.
From my perspective, it's protecting those animals, because if they're just out on the public, they're going to get gunned down.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so very much. And our property's high fence. And in all reality, if you're after a trophy stag in New Zealand, you want to be on a high fence managed property, because we can control the genetics and we can let the stags grow old. And if we didn't have those high fences, our good genetics would be roaming out into the public estate. We border onto public estate. And we would be losing those genetics. The poorer genetics would come in, and hunters would come in. Poaching does occur in New Zealand. People love to hunt. We don't have the strict rules that you have in America of going to jail if you poach, so they kind of get away lightly with it. And it's just really important, if you're going to deliver these quality stags and other species in their absolute prime, that you manage those populations. Out in the wild, there's great animals, there's good animals, there's a lot more hunting pressure. Like Myriam and I, we just run one hunt at a time, so we focus really importantly on, it's the holiday of a lifetime for people, and we often sit there and put ourselves in their shoes and go, Myriam and I met working in the ski industry, and if we were in Canada heli skiing, that's a lifelong trip for us, and how would we like to be treated?
Sure.
And so we replicate that with every one of our hunts. So I diverse, but anyway, we come back to the hunting on private properties. We just run one hunt at a time. We know how many hunts we're running a year. We know how to manage our animals year to year to year.
That's awesome. And are you hunting outside of the roar for stag as well?
Yeah.
Kind of a spot and stock style, or are you primarily focusing on the roar?
We will hunt red stag from late February right through until even June. So they don't drop, they don't cast their antlers until August. June, July, we're starting to get into the depths of our winter. And the animals, they lose a lot of body condition after the rut. And then if we start getting early snows after the rut, then we can get some deaths. You can see them getting pretty lean. Occasionally we'll chuck out a bit of supplementary feed if we're concerned about their health, those sorts of things. But we will hunt them right through. We've definitely, the stag here at the front, that's a 509-inch stag that was harvested in June, and it's a great looking stag. So yeah, and what we've got is we've got the red stag rut, which is in late March and April, and then our other alpine species, so the tar and the chamois, which are phenomenal hunts. They're a lot like the Alaskan sheep hunts, that sort of style of hunt. So they're in the rut in May and June. So when we talk to people at the booth here, Myriam and I are sitting there going, okay, is your primary target a red stag in the rut, and you want a tar as well? We can deliver that. Or is your primary target a big black-bodied tar in the rut, and you'd like a red stag? And that then enables us to say, well, you're better off to come in March and April, or you're better off to come in May and June. So we can deliver across the spectrum. We just need to find out what people's priorities are.
Sure. One of the things that I'm hearing that's pretty neat is you kind of transition from red stag into the tar and chamois where you're getting the best of both worlds. It would almost be like, kind of like in the U.S. where you've got elk that are rutting, then all of a sudden it turns into mule deer that are rutting, and it would be like all of a sudden then the turkey you're gobbling.
Yep.
It's like a just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
From your perspective as a guide, as the outfitter, as a hunter, it's got to be awesome to be able to kind of just go all in with this and then kind of transition to the next and keep you just fired up, and you get to see both animals or several of the animals rutting and doing their thing.
And just to even crank the excitement up a little bit more, right in the first weekend of May is the opening of our duck season. Which,
and is it good?
Oh, it's great, and it's a big part of New Zealand culture. Most farmers will not be able to be seen for the whole weekend because they'll just go into their hides, or we call them mai-mais, and it's a very social occasion, and just everyone gets into it, which is really fun. And we keep that. We don't do a lot of bird shooting guiding. We just keep that for our own enjoyment, and it's really fun. But exactly that, we've got the red stag rut flowing right into the start of the tar and chamois rut, and right at that time when the transition is happening, we've got opening of the duck season.
That's awesome.
So it's definitely the favourite time of the year, like from late February when the trout fishing is really good, and then we're straight into a red stag rut, and then we're into duck shooting, and then we're into the tar and the chamois rut, and then the ski season comes, know. So New Zealand, we live in paradise. We're very, very lucky. Yeah.
I heard you talk about taking one hunter at a time, and so it's a very personalized approach. Do you get where you have, maybe a small family or a husband and wife where they come and you just kind of focus on them and their group, and it's really, it's a personal deal, that's start to finish?
Start to finish. So Myriam and I, we've really sat back and looked at our business, and we said that's where we get the most pleasure, and that's also where we can deliver the highest standard. So we're not a lodge where we've got multiple guides and we're managing all of that and those sorts of things. And then so we meet people here, or we talk to them on the phone or over the internet, and then you build that. A lot of people here have been coming back and seeing us for 3 years in a row, and then they're putting down their deposit for a hunt 2 years out. So you're building that relationship, and then we see them at the show here, and then they're coming out 4 weeks later, and we pick them up in Christchurch Airport, and you're just really getting excited, and that's building. But then we take them home, and everything is very personalised, whether that is a single hunter. So this year, last season, we started the season with a single hunter that we'd been dealing with for 3 years, through to probably the maximum we do now is we've had a family of 8. The perfect sort of size is 2 hunting couples. I think that's where you get that real connection with everyone. There's not too much going on. So whether we get a lot of couples, we get quite a few honeymoon type trips, and a lot of 2 couples travelling together. So the husband and wives, either all 4 of them hunt or 2 of them are hunting. But we ensure that the non-hunters are having an incredible experience as well as the hunters.
Sure.
Which is really... And Myriam and I just keep it as personalised as we can possibly make it. We do all the guiding, we do all the food prep, we deliver all the meals. You'll see the meals on the TV
and Myriam,
in the brochure.
That's really her specialty too. She's really good at all of that aspect of the business.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how she does it, because she's a very good guide, and she comes out. So we're out there guiding together every day together, and then she goes home and whips up these restaurant quality or better meals. I'm out there caping out animals and hanging meat in the freezer, and next minute everyone's jumping in the shower, and we walk back in and we just sit there and go, how did you do that? Because only 2 hours ago you was caping out a red stag, and carrying it out. So her skills around that and you can read it in our testimonials on our website. It's unbelievable how she delivers that stuff. It's just, and we are such a strong team, and I feel very fortunate the fact that we both can live, work, and be husband and wife together, and just have a great love for each other. We're very privileged because a lot of people can't work together as husband and wife. So we rate that very highly, and I think that flows through to the clients. Yeah.
I want to give you a chance to make sure that you can tell the listeners where they can reach out to you, how they can connect with you. I want to
Yep.
make sure you do that. I also follow you on Instagram. I think it's at Backcountry New Zealand, but
Yep.
I'll let you tell how people can best get a hold of you. And to the listeners out there, I've personally gone with these two and look forward to going back. And, I just know how good you guys are with people, how truly into it you are, and it's not just a business. It's a lifestyle.
Very much
and
so.
it's connecting with people and making lifelong friends. And in our industry, it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
You get a lot of businesses, and bless their heart, they're just trying to make a living. But you guys, this is more than making a living. This is you guys. This is your life. And you're so personable. And I walk by and see you talking to people and just see the way you're interacting. And I think people will pick that up on this podcast as well. So
Yep.
I encourage people to reach out, but I want to give you a chance to let people know.
Well, and thanks, Jay. It's been a pleasure knowing you over all of these years. We can't wait to get you back. It will be a February, March time so that you can fish and see the rut. And we need to get you a big red stag. And I have to, just before I go into that, I think I just need to express how grateful we are for our children as well. So we've got a 20-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old son, and they're a big part of our business. They've got a big list on the refrigerator that they come home to after school or university every day, which is when we're out guiding, we're going, hey, these are the tasks that you guys have. They play a big part. And
so it's a whole team.
It's a whole team, even the dog's involved. But, the old Springer Spaniel, he's a great dog. But the kids play a big part of that, and it comes through in our testimonials, and people love meeting them. And they're just a great little asset. They're very personable also. And I learnt that way. I started at Lake Brunner Lodge on the west coast of New Zealand, which was one of the first fly fishing lodges when I was 12 in the school holidays. And those skills that you develop as an individual when you've been dealing with people from all over the world is pretty important to everything. So reaching out to us, obviously we come to the Hunt Expo every year. We're at booth 326. And a lot of people come here. Instagram is at Backcountry New Zealand. Our website is backcountrynewzealand.com. That's an ever-evolving website in the winter when I get a chance to. And we're also on Facebook, which is Facebook.com/huntingnz, or just search for Backcountry New Zealand. Yeah. And otherwise, you can just give us a call, send us an email. Any of those messaging things that we try and keep up with is in our late 40s, and our kids know everything about social media. Yeah. Oh, Myriam's just saying she's not in her late 40s, but perhaps that's just me. I'm the late 40 type guy. Yeah.
She definitely ages better than you do.
She ages a lot better. She's laughing away here. She ages a lot better than I do, but... yeah, so it's been an absolute pleasure, Jay.
Yeah.
And it's so nice after all these years to actually sit down and do this and catch up properly. And
for sure.
We're both busy people, and we message occasionally and say hi occasionally.
It's always great to see you two, and just excited to get this out to the listeners, and look forward to seeing your success. You're going to leave here and head right into your seasons and such, so I'm excited for you guys, and I just really appreciate you taking the time before the show. The show's just about to kick off, and it's already been a really busy show.
Yeah, it's been
Today's
a great
Saturday,
show.
It should be crazy. So.
Yeah, today goes crazy. Yeah. I won't be doing a lot of talking at 9 o'clock tonight, I can tell you that. Hey, thanks so much, Jay.
Buddy.
Really appreciate it.
God bless.
Okay, thank you.